Hi, I'm Ellisa Levant Beaver and the creator of the Facebook page Healing Grief with EVP, A Spiritual Journey. And last year, I was privileged to meet one of the members of my group, Deborah Byrd, and her story is remarkable. And I'm going to bring you her true story today of her relationship with her husband, Tony, a true soulmate, and a story of their relationship both here in the physical and now that Tony has crossed over to the heavenly realm, the continuation of the relationship between Deborah and Tony. So here is Deborah. And
hello.
Hi, welcome, and thank you so much for being here. And
thank you so much for inviting me.
My pleasure and our pleasure. So please tell us a little bit about how you met Tony and about your marriage.
Well, I met Tony in 1975 after recovering from a brief failed marriage. I was very young. Tony and I met at the age of 18. We were both 18. We're actually exactly 8 weeks apart on the same day. And we met, and immediately we knew that we were meant to be together. I mean, we just we never thought about it. We never said, well, let's date and see what happens. We just like walked right into it. And from our marriage, we had 4 beautiful children, 2 girls and 2 boys. Tony is a professional musician, and he was a child prodigy. He's been playing drums and singing since he was maybe 13 years old. His mom had to escort him to different clubs because he was too young. So he was pretty much advanced for a 18-year-old. He was really mature for his age. So I felt head over here for him because I really needed something in my life, after coming out of a failed marriage. So we immediately bonded. And it's almost like the earth shifted when we got together. People that were around us seemed to change. I mean, it was obvious to us that it was something going on here between us. But being as young as we were, we had no idea what we were headed for. So it was a beautiful marriage for 41 years. And he actually got ill in 2004. And at the time, I was still working as a nurse. And my only option was to make him better. So we never focused on exactly what would happen if he actually passed. At least I didn't. I never thought about it. He tried to talk to me about it from time to time, but I never wanted to talk about it. I was totally in denial. So we went through his illness for 12 years before he actually passed from it. And it was very grief-stricken, his illness. Watching his children suffer because he was suffering. He's watching us suffer, so it was pretty traumatic for the whole family.
Yeah. And I understand that a couple of weeks before Tony made his transition, he showed you in a dream.
Yes, he did. Exactly 2 weeks before Tony passed, I had a dream that he had passed. And I was at his funeral, and he was laying there in a coffin, and his sister was standing over him. And all of a sudden, he opened his eyes, and he smiled, this biggest smile you could ever see. And he climbed out of the coffin, walked directly over to me, reached his hand out, and said, Deb, come on, we're going home. And at that point, I was just so thrilled that he was back. I would go anywhere with him. So he led me down this long, like a cathedral type hallway. And at the end of the hallway were two very large doors. They had to be at least 15 or 20 feet high. And at the top of the doors were rounded. And he took his hand and pushed the door open. And the first thing that I saw was a mountain on the left-hand side. And I looked ahead, and all I saw was vivid color, flowers and trees. And right after that, I immediately woke up. But when I woke up, I felt this pit in my stomach. I couldn't talk to anybody about it. At the time, we weren't expecting Tony to pass. So this dream for me was traumatic. And I couldn't talk to my kids about it. I couldn't talk to him about it. He's the one I always go to, for anything. And it was really sad because I couldn't share that with him. And I really felt awful about it. So I carried this dream around in my belly for about 2 weeks. And one day I just got up and it was released. All the fear, all the pain, all the ache from that dream was released. But then something else happened. He was getting in bed and he looked me in the eye and a voice said to me, your husband is about to pass. So I immediately knew it was something other than me that was telling me this. I can tell that it was something other than what was inside of me. Mm-hmm. And I really tried to ignore it. I really did. But deep down, I knew that one day I would have to face that. But I didn't think it would happen so soon. Mm-hmm. So we went on for a couple of days. And the night he passed, he woke up that morning and asked for the very same meal, the first meal I ever cooked him when I was 18 years old. Wow. He asked for that meal. Wow. And so I got, incredible. So I got up, hurried to the store, got everything I needed. I made this meal for him and he ate like 3 helpings, something he hadn't done in a very long time. And even his grandkids were like, God, granddaddy, you're eating it all from us. So he really ate good the day that he passed. But fast forward, that night he asked me to rub his back. And he had just got through eating a bowl of spinach. So I said, okay, get in the bed. I'm going to get lotion. I'm going to take the bowl in the kitchen. I'm going to come back and I'm going to rub your back. So I'm walking to my doorway with this empty bowl in my hand. And as I got to the doorway, something stopped me dead in my tracks. I couldn't take another step. And I heard a voice say to me, turn around and look at your husband. So I turned around and looked at him and his back was facing me. So I couldn't see his face. So I said, okay, he's okay. He's laying there waiting for me to come back. And I went to take another step and the voice stopped me again. And this time very loud and told me, no, turn around and go look at your husband. Okay. I walked over on the side of the bed and my husband was having a seizure. So that's when we rushed him to the hospital.
Okay, excuse me. Before we go forward, I want to address the voice because that's a very clear voice and very instructive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So can you tell us a little more about the voice and how you experienced it and how you believed it and listened, and elaborate on the voice before we go forward?
Well, this particular voice I've heard before. Not very often, but I have heard it before. So I kind of figured without knowing that it was a higher being, mm-hmm. something higher than me. And when the voice spoke to me to tell me to look at my husband, it was a little more dominant than it usually is. And I think pretty much that's what actually stopped me in my tracks, because I wasn't prepared for it. And it was very dominant. But the second time kind of scared me a bit because it was very dominant. And I think after looking over everything, I think the actual intention was to get him to the hospital because my grandkids were here, my son was here. And I don't think it would have been too good for him to pass at home. So I think the whole intention was to get him to the hospital and get him surrounded by all of his family. So we managed to get him to the hospital, and he hung on for a couple of hours before he actually passed. But I must say, this is something that I actually did not bring up to you before, and I just really thought about it. He was actually speaking to someone.
Oh.
And my daughter said, "Mommy, he's talking to you." And I'm like, I just felt that he was talking to someone else. He was actually talking and looking in the corner, looking up at the ceiling.
Really?
So, but at the time, I was blind to this, the whole scenario. So my frame of mind wasn't in a place to actually realize that he was actually talking to deceased loved ones who had came to rescue him. Oh. And it didn't really dawn on me till later. So that was something very special. At the time, it wasn't that special, but as time went on and I actually thought about it and went over it in my mind, I realized how special it was.
We hear, it's so validating for you to share that, because we hear so often that people just getting ready to make their transition who are lucid and awake do look at like up toward the ceiling or in the corner of the room and speak to people. And, we can only, imagine or take as faith or on faith value that it is loved ones and guides and, family crossed over that he sees
exactly,
and that are welcoming him to make that transition and go with them.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible for me as well and for his kids, because he actually didn't want to go.
Yeah.
I just have to say that. He didn't want to go. And that's what he was referring to when he was talking to this spirit. He didn't want to go. So, we've been together 41 years and we never wanted to be apart. And we did talk about that. So he wasn't really ready to go.
Yeah.
So he put up a little fight.
Oh, yeah. And you had mentioned too that besides you knowing that you two are meant to be together, right? I mean, at 18 years old, right from the very beginning, that you just had, you had such a long and beautiful marriage, and you had the type of connection where you've indicated that you telepathically were in tune with each other. So even drumming up on stage with his friend, you and he be exchanging a conversation telepathically. Is that
yes?
That accurately?
And it's nothing that we actually created ourselves. Everything was given to us by the universe. Everything that we experienced was given to us by the universe. We never opted for that type of relationship. It was just given to us by the universe. And Tony and I had been talking back and forth telepathically together for most of those 41 years. I knew what he was thinking. I could be in a store and see something he wanted and come home and he'll say, I was just thinking about that. So our communication it just got better over the years. And he would be on stage playing drums and we would have a whole conversation. And I remember a couple of times watching a couple of his musician friends. They would look at him, then look at me, look at him, look at me. And they get this look on their face like, what are they doing? And a couple of them finally caught on after all those years. You guys are really talking to each other. You know, he would ask me questions and it was fantastic. And even to the point where I could be in a store, a big, huge store like Walmart's or a grocery store. And he would walk in the store and I could feel him. I could feel him from the time he walked in the door to the time he walked up behind me. And he would always find me. I could never be lost to him. He would always find me. He would just know right where I was at. And I could feel him walk up on me. And I would say, I know that's you behind me. And he just smiled at me. So we had a really wonderful relationship like that.
He has had a very strong presence and energy in the physical for you to be able to feel him enter a store, you know, and know he's there.
Yes.
And now we're going to start moving into the story of how strong an energy he is on the other side.
Yes.
So, so we'll go back to the voice, which really did give you the blessing of knowledge to turn and go to him and not go downstairs to see he was having the seizure, get him to the hospital and stabilized enough that family could be around him at the time that he passed.
Exactly.
And then more things happened afterwards. So let's go into that.
Okay. Actually, the very same day he passed, which was February 2nd, I came home. And when you have a loved one pass in the hospital and you go home, you're actually still present at the hospital. You know, it takes a while for you to come to your senses to realize what actually happens. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened with me. So after returning home, the first thing I noticed was that the clock in my bedroom had stopped at the time of his passing.
Amazing.
Now, this clock I had just bought a week prior to him getting ill. And I bought the clock and I also bought a pack of batteries. So when I saw that, I was a little alarmed. I'm like, that's the time he passed. So I said, okay. So I took the clock down off the wall. I took the battery out and I put the battery in another clock. And the other clock worked. So I knew I was dealing with something supernatural at that moment. And this happened right after I returned home from the hospital. So that night, I had a house full of people, you know, my kids, a couple of other relatives, and I was sitting on a couch talking to my grandson, and all of a sudden, I heard Tony's voice tell me to get up and come outside. So at that point, I'm like, okay, am I crazy? Because like I said, when your head is still in a whole nother place, it's kind of hard to get a grip on what's going on around you. So I actually heard his voice tell me to come outside. So I'm like, okay. I got up. And that particular day, February 2nd, in Ohio, it's usually snowing and cold. But that particular day, it was 52 degrees. So I went outside, and once I got out there and was alone, you know, with everybody else in the house, I began to speak to him. And I told him how sorry I was that I couldn't save him. He stopped me dead in my tracks. And he said, there's things that I need you to know. He gave me instructions on his memorial service. He told me that he would never leave me, that he would always be with me, and that he loved me. But then afterwards, the amazing part was I could actually feel him hug me. Now, you got to remember where my head was. I mean, it was very overwhelming.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out, am I imagining this or is this really happening? Mm-hmm. So I finally determined that I'm not imagining this. I heard my husband's voice. I felt my husband hug me. I can't be imagining this. The clock stopped. What's going on? Because by this time, like I had mentioned before, I wasn't really an afterlife person.
Right.
In my household, we never talked about death. So we never talked about the afterlife. So I grew up not knowing about the afterlife. So that was kind of overwhelming for me to have him to come to me like that.
Yeah.
But I knew that I wasn't imagining it. And finally, after about an hour of standing outside in 52 degrees temperature, my grandson came out and he said, "Grandma, what are you doing out here?" And I said, "I'm talking to your granddaddy." And he kind of looked at me like, "Oh, here we go." But he's a teenager, and you know, that's what you expect out of teenagers.
Yeah.
But I actually went in the house and immediately spoke to him and said, "You know, that was pretty cool. I'm going to need a whole lot more of that." And I could feel him smiling at me. Mm-hmm. I could just feel him smiling at me. So that was incredible. And I knew I was up against something at that point. I knew I was up against something. I knew it was the beginning of something really big. Because after I thought about it, and just actually really thought about it, I decided that either he is still here and he's communicating with me, or maybe he's stuck. So that's really what prompted me to start my afterlife research, because I wasn't really sure what was happening. I felt the love, I felt the closeness, but I was afraid for him because I didn't have any knowledge. Right. I didn't know if maybe he couldn't cross over, or was he just being adamant about staying with his wife. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. So it was very, very overwhelming at the beginning, because the next day after that is when he started showering us with signs. He was turning the TVs on and off. He was flickering lights. He was tinkering with the microwave. He was walking through the house. My son actually heard him walking through the house one night during that period of time, you know, when we were trying to get his services underway. Mm-hmm. He was just staying over to comfort me, my son. And he was half asleep. Now, my son is a manly man. He did 13 years in the military. So, okay. And he's a really big guy. So he is no pushover.
Yeah.
And he actually heard his dad walking in the kitchen. And he said he stood up and he said, "Please let this be my mother." Even though he knew in his heart of hearts that it wasn't his mother. So he actually came and peeked into the bedroom and saw me in the bed and concluded, wow, he is still here. So my grandkids, they even got signs. He was very adamant about letting us know he was still here. And that kind of shook me a little bit because I've never heard anyone talk about this before. I've
Yeah.
never heard anyone talk about having that kind of connection with somebody that passed over. I've had dozens and dozens of relatives that have passed over, and I've never had any connection or communication from anybody.
So Tony has made it clear to most of your family, your kids, your grandkids, that that he's still very much present.
Yes, yes. When
And
he started showing his grandkid signs, I knew that he was very adamant for
yeah,
some reason about letting us know that he still exists.
yeah.
So yeah, it
And
was pretty overwhelming.
I can't imagine, but where I see a gift in that is that so often it's an isolated family member that gets the evidence and the experience, and others don't share the beliefs and they haven't had the experience. And here it seems like you're in a somewhat unusual situation where your husband is making it so strongly known and undeniable, you know, that that your family's coming on board, because there is no other explanation for what they're
Exactly,
experiencing.
exactly, exactly.
So you can
And
speak openly with your kids and your grandchildren about him as he exists. I mean, in the present
right,
tense, in the present tense.
right. And here's the thing. Actually, I tried to figure out why exactly, because for me, there is a reason that he needed his entire family to know of his existence.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of my grandkids, I have 10, and some of them are small kids, like 8, 7, 8, 9. And I didn't want them to be spooked by it, but they seem to take it pretty well. And my conclusion for that is, how would I have felt if I was their age and I realized that there's no death? How different would that have made my life?
Mm-hmm.
That probably would have had a really big impact, because like we talked about, fear plays a big part on
Yeah.
the way we live our life, the
Yeah.
things we do in life, our decisions that we make. A lot of decisions that we make are out of fear.
Yes.
But if you can get rid of that basic fear of death, just imagine the things that you can accomplish in life as a
It's,
child.
yes. Absolutely. I absolutely agree. Um, and, you know, that's something that we can pass on, you know.
Exactly.
So either I also, like you, thought dead is dead. And, you know, until I was put in a situation to learn differently.
And the
And
thing is, we didn't ask for this.
no,
None of us asked for this,
no,
you know. So
it
the
propels,
universe works.
yeah, into a journey. And it's incredible. And another thing that I want to go back to and share with our listeners is the spontaneous healing of your leg. If you
Oh
could
my
tell us
God.
about that.
Yes, I can. I had a static ulcer on my left leg, which I got in 2003. And that ulcer got bigger over the years. It kept getting infected. And I went to like 5 or 6 different physicians to try to get it healed, because at the time I was still working, I was on my feet, And, you know, it was just wreaking havoc on my leg.
So it's like an
So
open sore, like an
it's
open,
an open sore.
ulcerated skin.
I mean, it's like open and deep down to the bone.
Deep
That type
in the
of
bone?
sore.
Okay.
Yes, that type of sore. And I actually ended up believing that I was going to live with this thing the rest of my life. Because after 13 years, and you've done so many different types of healing and nothing helped, I had just gotten used to it and gotten used to the fact that I probably was going to keep this ulcer with me the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
But Tony had a little something different on his mind. And I had no idea. I woke up one morning and I usually would wrap the leg. I would put some gauze on it with a little moisturizer, and I would wrap it. And this is the way I walked around every day. And this particular day, not looking at my leg because I'm in total grief still. And I wasn't paying any attention to my own health. So he had plenty of time to heal it without me knowing, because I wasn't paying any attention to my health. And this particular day, I put the wrap on my leg and I got up and started to walk, and it fell off. It slid down. It just slid down my leg. And I'm like, wow, because it usually sticks. This is an open sore.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked down at my leg and I couldn't really see it. So I had to lift it up on the bed, and it was completely healed. Completely healed.
All the skin was closed and
All the skin was closed.
gone.
Yes, it was completely healed. Completely healed. I couldn't believe it.
That's a true, that is a miracle healing. I mean, that is just absolutely unexplainable.
Because he was really upset about the ulcer as well. You know, he hated seeing me like that. He hated seeing me in pain. And I couldn't wear dresses. I had to wear pants all the time. And I would always complain about not being able to wear dresses. So I'm not surprised that he would find a way to heal my leg. But he actually did. It was completely healed. And I have not had another episode, infection, or anything since then. And this was 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. But the ironic part happened maybe a couple of months later. I was in my room and I could hear him speak to me. I could actually hear him speak to me. And he told me, he said, look at your leg. And so I put my leg up on the bed and I looked at it, and there was a cross on my leg, right in the center. Laying right there in the middle of the ulcer was a cross.
Amazing.
So
amazing.
I didn't know what to think. I mean, it's like, why is this happening to me? You know, it gets a little overwhelming because if you're not ready for it,
yeah,
and it's happening that quick and that profuse, you know, it kind of knocks you for a loop. So I was ecstatic that my leg was healed. I was ecstatic.
Can you say about the time frame of Tony passing and your wound healing was about how close in time?
I'm going to say about 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 2 or 3 months at the most, but no more than 3 months.
So yeah, it's incredible. Because as you mentioned when we spoke previously, it was an open sore for 13 years. You are a nurse. You had high quality physicians helping you to try to heal this sore with no effect.
Yes.
And a couple of months, your bandage falls off and it's gone.
Completely healed.
And then you hear Tony say to you, look at it, and you look and you
There's
see
a cross.
cross right there. And
Did you see the picture?
I did see the picture. I did see the picture, and it's incredible because it's a white cross on your darker skin, and it's
Yes.
like almost like a plus sign kind of.
Yes.
I yeah.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yes.
It's amazing.
And what's ironic to me is with my medical background, I'm aware that anything that goes that deep into your skin needs to heal from the bottom up.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot figure out when that happened for me. Because when I looked at it, it was completely healed. So when did it start healing from the bottom, from the bone up? Is my question.
Yeah.
And I just cannot figure that out, but I am just happy that, it happened for me.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
actually a miracle.
It is.
I had been dealing with this ulcer, agonizing for 13 years. And it's almost like this was the first thing he wanted to do for me after he passed over. So I thought that was pretty neat.
He's done so much.
So much.
What a man.
Yes.
What a blessing for you and your life and your family. And he's just a big teddy bear, isn't he?
Yes, he is. If you met him, you would love him automatically. Anybody that ever met him,
he just
we would go to
want to give a big hug.
Yes.
Like a big bear. Yeah.
Yes, that's my Tony.
Yeah.
We would go to the places that he played a lot of times, and when he walked in the door, I mean, it was just amazing just being with him, just sharing that light with him. He would walk in the door and the whole room would light up.
Oh.
And everyone wanted to be close to him.
Mm-hmm.
After we would sit there for like 5 or 10 minutes, half of the room would be at our table. And it was amazing just watching that with him. He was incredible human being. And he always had that strong quality. He loved hard. He worked hard. He was just an incredible human being.
That is, it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And I know, like many people, when you're in grief so deeply, it's hard to imagine staying here. It's hard because there is a desire to be where your loved one is. And fortunately, most of us do stay. But you actually had a little thought, and then you heard Tony say to you.
Yeah. Well, actually, he told my daughter.
Oh, he told your daughter. Okay.
Yes.
He said,
what happened was I'm a little ashamed, but it's okay.
That's okay.
I was actually contemplating suicide. I just could not imagine living on this earth without him. I just couldn't. Even though he was giving me signs every day, I could actually feel his touch. You know, he was talking to me. He was giving me messages from other people. I mean, this man did everything in his power to make sure that I knew that he still existed. And for me, I'm trying to word it. I found that I think actually when he passed over, he knew that we were meant to be together. Because he has given me little hints and little signs about us being together. Mm-hmm. And this particular day, I wanted to be with him. And I actually thought about suicide the first time in my entire life. I've always been a strong woman. You know, I've always stood up for what I believe in. But I felt a little weak, you know, because I lost my spouse. And the thought crossed my mind. It's not like I actually planned it,
Right.
but the thought crossed my mind. Well, the next day, my daughter called me and she says, I had a dream about Daddy last night. And I said, oh, really? What did he say? And she said, he said, stop doing that because he can feel it. And I kind of laughed it off because I'm astonished that she would even call me with that. And she said, what are you over there doing? And I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
He is really feeling me. So I promised him that day that I would never go to that dark place again. Mm-hmm. So that was his way of trying to keep me strong because he saw me getting weak. So he wants me to finish this journey. You know, he wants me to live the rest of my life out. So to honor him, that's what I decided to do.
Okay. Well, that's incredible. And such an interesting life and afterlife, and such an interesting, I know, history of 41 years together, and your life with a child musical prodigy, a jazz musician, right?
Yes.
Musician.
Well, he did a little of everything. I've even watched him play country and western. So
oh yeah,
he is definitely a prodigy because he can play anything you put in front of him. So he was a great musician.
I mean, to have a life in music is just like, ooh.
I had the best life a woman could ask for. You couldn't give me a man with all the money in the world and make me feel the way that I felt when I was with him. Because, you know, a musician's typical life, a lot of musicians are not married, they're single, you know, it's just a whole lot of things happening in the music world. You know, so a lot of them choose to be single. But he surpassed everything. He's gotten teased by some of his musician friends about lugging his wife around with him, you know, but he gave me a beautiful, beautiful life. I cannot ask for anything more.
And after he passed recently, you wrote a book about your life, about your marriage.
Yes, I did.
You show us your book.
Yes, I can.
It is called From Deborah Byrd, Story of a, I can't see the bottom.
Story of a Songbird.
Story of
the life and afterlife of my twin flame.
Oh, okay. All right. And that book is available.
Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and pretty much any book, you know, any book distribution.
Yeah.
Under.
We don't need anything besides Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Exactly.
That's plenty. I love the cover art. That's beautiful.
That's very creative. And I'm going to give you a little insight on the book, just a little.
All right.
I had began writing a book 2 years before he passed, but the basis for the book at that time was to tell our love story and share with the world what it was like living with a child prodigy. Mm-hmm. So that was my intention, just to share with the world what it's like living in a world of music, you know, with lights blaring and, you know, being up late at night. And, you know, I just wanted to share that with everyone. So he knew I was writing the book 2 years before he passed. So that was actually a good beginning for this book. Mm-hmm. So what I did was actually took what I had already had and just added to it.
Yeah, the life and afterlife.
Exactly. But the thing is, I was also in college taking bachelor classes, and I had like 2 semesters left before he passed, and I had no idea how I was ever going to finish school. Between my husband and probably a lot of other spirits, I actually graduated on the honor roll, on the dean's list.
Wow.
And actually completed the book a little while after I graduated. And the thing is, he pushed me with this book. I mean, he really, 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 really pushed me. After doing my classwork, I'd say, okay, that's enough. Push the laptop back. And he would say, no, work on the book. So he really, really, really pushed me. And I never would think that I could have done all of that, and grieving too. That's a lot to deal with.
It
So,
is.
I did not do it alone. There's no way I could have wrote a book, graduated, and grieved at the same time.
Yeah.
And still kept my mental health.
Yeah. This is story, but I mean, your story had such an impact on me. And I remember when I became acquainted with you, it was at least a year ago.
Yes.
Or longer. And we spoke on the phone, and I heard a lot of what we talked about today, and it stayed with me. I am fortunate that I get to speak with so many people under extraordinary circumstances, but you were one in particular where I felt like this I would just love to interview you. I would love to hear more. And I'm actually very interested in your book too.
Well, I love sharing. I really love sharing. I will stand on a mountain and shout to the world if I could, because this is actually extraordinary.
Yeah, this is exactly the type of everything we've just gone over is the type of information you want to stand on the highest mountain.
Exactly.
And shout it out to the world, because there's so much faith and hope and inspiration and miracle and expansion of mind, that there's so much more. There's so much more, and we just can't barely scratch the surface of knowing. But it's people like you who can bring in, this isn't fiction. This is authentic. This is real. This is documented, some of it too, and
exactly,
and bring it in, and just it inspires, and it grows hope. Certainly in myself, it like expands, hope and intrigue, and I just can't thank you enough for coming.
Well, that is my intention, is to inspire by my story, because I am inspired by my story.
Yes.
A lot of days I wake up and I have to pinch myself, because I wonder what I did so wonderful to deserve these blessings. So, sometimes I think I'm losing my mind. Sometimes I think I'm crazy, but
you're not.
I know. I come right back around and focus. So it's still incredible to me, because you got to remember, we still have to deal with this world. Our everyday living, making sure our bills are paid, making sure we got food in the house. So sometimes it gets a little overwhelming, because I feel as if I'm not stuck, but I'm branched over two different worlds. And this is the way that I'm living my life every single day. So that makes it hard to deal with a lot of things that's happening in the world today, in a lot of situations. I find myself withdrawn from a lot of people that I've known in the past, because they don't really understand, even some family members.
Right.
Because I'm going to talk about it. This is a miracle. I can't keep miracles. I never could.
Right. Right.
I'm going to talk about it. I'm telling the world. So, after a while, I guess it got kind of, I don't know if I would use the word irritating to people. So they kind of, we kind of just stayed our distance. So it's not easy communicating with people every day when you're on this type of path.
No.
And I'm sure you understand that.
I understand it, and I think our listeners all understand it too, because we're all seeking more knowledge. We're all on spiritual journeys, and many people are not. They can't relate, and we cannot blame them for the fact that they cannot relate.
Because at one time we couldn't, right?
That's right. At one time we were just like them.
Exactly.
And we have to keep that in mind, in that we don't really take things so personally. And I appreciate, even with somebody from that other world, will at least hear me out,
Exactly.
And then many, over time, or in my own family, it's like you crack a little bit of light in their darkness, and they start to kind of open up. Well, maybe this is real, well, maybe, because my own family, or one of my family members said, Alyssa's lost her mind.
I mean, I've heard that before.
She's and now it's more like there's pride. Well, my daughter communicates with the other side. Well, but in the beginning it was like, if I can't, I'm speaking of my dad, if he cannot intellectually understand something, then, and he's a brilliant man. So if he can't comprehend and understand it, and he's not experienced it, then it's not real.
Exactly.
And so, if I speak with dead people, he's going to obviously feel I'm crazy.
Exactly. I get that a lot as well.
I do feel we're lucky that there, at least in time now, this has just become, this is on television, the mediumship, shows, the
right.
Spirituality, the spiritual churches. I mean, we're very out in the open, and it's just becoming more, it's not so fringe. I think it's making its way a little more into the mainstream, and that's a good thing, because otherwise you hear voices where you go to a psychiatric hospital, you get
exactly,
or you're
exactly,
you're schizophrenic or something.
Exactly.
So it's, I don't know. I mean, obviously it could be more widely accepted, but this is our path. They walk their path, we walk ours, and
exactly.
Hopefully, but it is nice to have people that we can share these stories and experiences with.
It's wonderful.
Who are not going to look at us funny,
Because for a while, for at least the first year or so, I didn't have anyone to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have anyone to talk to. No one on social media that I knew of, until like recently I started finding different groups, but it was just nobody to talk to. And the experience that I was having with him was so dominant that I felt I was alone.
Yeah.
And it was really an overwhelming feeling to feel alone and to have to experience something that you couldn't really share with everyone.
Right. Yeah. No, I know. I understand that. I understand it very well.
So it feels really good to be able to share. It feels wonderful to be able to talk to people that won't look at you funny and think you're crazy.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to have this experience. So I'm thrilled that you decided to interview me. I really am, because I needed to say that. So
I'm, it was my pleasure, and I really appreciate you being so open and sharing this. So I want to thank you. Thank you.
you're very welcome.
Thank you.
And I
And
want to thank you for
oh,
having me.
thank you. So I am going to end our interview here, but you stand by.
Okay.